tale, and we simply approach it from those sort of first principles.
Is this the first non-Shakespearean thing you've done?
As a company, it is,
As a full production, yes.
Now, Amelie, Fiasco's traveled an incredible distance in a very short time. A few years ago, weren't you all taking tickets, folding up the chairs, and mopping the floors after a performance?
And doing laundry,
So
actually, after every performance.
Are you happy that you don't have to take the costumes home for laundering?
I suppose so. I suppose it's nice to be able to go home right after the show and rest. But
Is this
actually
happily ever after for you all?
Yes, but what happens after the happily ever after when you turn the page? No, I think there is still the element, though, very present in on stage and off among the company of a sort of do-it-yourself. Everyone in the whole building, we feel like, is contributing at all times. So in a way, though we're not doing the laundry, we're still making the show every day.
Do any of you have a sense of longing that the princes feel after they have rescued their women, missing the challenge of the quest or the agony, as one of the songs suggests?
Well, I think it is a natural part of sort of achieving a certain piece of what you want in life, whether that's professional or personal or in relationships or anything. You know, there's always a part of you that wonders what's next. And I think that's why the show resonates with people so much, is because the authors had the bravery and kind of audacity to ask, you know, what are we telling ourselves and our kids when we tell them stories that there is such a thing as the end of something, as a happy ending or an ending of any kind, as opposed to just the next day of your life.
In this case, you have broken down the fourth wall and made the audience part of the show.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, it's really part and parcel of the way that we like to tell stories and create theater, which is to say that we believe very strongly that theater happens within the four walls of that space. And we are all sharing that. We're sharing the air. We're breathing the same air. We rely upon the audience to fill in the gaps imaginatively. We try to create a world that provides enough information for them to lean forward imaginatively and create the rest of the world, but we really rely upon them, and breaking the fourth wall and sending strong signals that they are part of this story is important to how the piece works and to the success of it.
But we have a number of different generations that have dealt with the concept of happily ever after differently. Baby boomers as opposed to the millennials or Gen X or whatever. Do you get feedback in that regard?
That's a really interesting question.
Do you think that different people are
Yeah.
taking this differently?
Well, it's funny sometimes like the last question, we come out into the audience in the beginning of the play, of the musical. We come out onto the stage and connect, in plain light, and then we actually sometimes come off the stage and meet people. And there are definitely sometimes people of different generations who say, "Why are you doing this? What are you? What is this about?" And it's really a pleasure sometimes to bridge that gap by saying, "We are interested in seeing your faces and your eyes, and because we really want to connect."
Although this is not a new idea, we had actors going out into the audience, at least going back to
Shakespeare,
Shakespeare
even
did,
Shakespeare, yeah.
but Pirandello and
Six
and
characters,
even
yeah.
It's
Olsen
well-worn
and Johnson
territory.
in another way.
Yeah, and in some ways I think musicals provide a wonderful opportunity to connect with the audience, because of course they're not slavishly naturalistic anyway, because of the use of music and stuff. So it's an opportunity to say, we can all get inside this theatrical event together.
Was this part of the original concept when Fiasco was formed?
Well, we started in Cymbeline in our first production. We did it in a gallery space, so it wasn't a proscenium arch. It was like we were actually literally in the same room. So you kind of couldn't get away from the relationship between the audience and the actors. And so then when we mounted that in a proscenium space, it felt only natural to continue the direct relationship. So it was circumstantial in a way that we did it.
Yeah, and I think it also goes back to our graduate school training.
Yeah.
It's the way that we
You all went to school together?
We all went to the Brown Trinity MFA program, and we created theater in spaces like that. There were raw open spaces. We were all sharing that. And that's also a kind of ethos of Trinity Repertory Theater, which is, so it sort of goes back multiple stages to a kind of thinking about theater in the way that we've already described it, as something that happens between the actors and the audience, and not actors on one side, audience on the other.
But I get the sense that it's also important within the group to make it as democratic as possible.
That's certainly one of the things that makes our company unique, especially when working on musicals that tend to have a very specific hierarchical structure.
How do you do that? Somebody has to say, you're out of tune.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, yeah.
it's a huge mess in some ways, but we were just talking about this earlier before we came on. But it's a kind of necessary mess. It's okay to have things that are loose. It's okay to have areas that are gray, or departments that are blurring their boundaries as you try to figure out how to make something happen. So, on a practical level, I can watch the stuff that Noah's in. Noah can watch the stuff that I'm in. But it's a totally group ensemble-based problem-solving, approach, which involves the design team, the creative team, and the entire company.
We're talking to Ben Steinfeld, Noah Brody, and Emily Young, who are all involved in various ways with a new production of Stephen Sondheim's Into the Woods. And Noah, when you were here to talk about Cymbeline, you discussed the joy and freedom of working on something that's in the public domain. What's it been like to work on something that's not?
Well, we've been very lucky in that both Stephen Sondheim and James Lapine have been very supportive and open to our ideas and our exploration.
And some of the changes you've made?
And yes, and those were vetted. We unlike with Shakespeare, we actually had to ask permission to make some of those changes. But like with the Shakespeare, with Into the Woods, our goal has always been to do Into the Woods, not to change Into the Woods, not to fix Into the Woods. It doesn't need that from us. We're just trying to bring ourselves to it in the closest possible relationship. And because of some of our ideas, it required relatively minor tweaks, but they have shown incredible support for that. So it's actually been a wonderful collaborative relationship.
Do you look for a show that's potentially offering good roles to every member of the company?
We do. It's important to us that every actor is doing something that they're interested in doing, so that it's really motivated in that way every step of the way.
Although I would imagine more than one person might want a certain role.
Yes.
Yeah, that does happen.
Everybody wants to play Lear.
That's right.
Right.
Well, luckily we've got a few years before we have to worry about
Yeah.
that.
And there's a reason why we haven't chosen titles
Right.
like Lear. We actually have been drawn toward pieces that function as ensemble pieces or can function as ensemble pieces.
It's very impressive that you were brought in by the Roundabout, given the long history, its long history with Sondheim. One of their theaters is even named for him. And how soon did Sondheim and Lapine get involved in what you were doing? Did you invite them to participate?
Oh, we did, and we were encouraged to. We had Noah and I had lunch with James Lapine before rehearsals began to discuss some of our broader ideas of what we thought we might be interested in doing. And as Noah said, he was extremely supportive. And then our contact with Stephen Sondheim began when he saw the show at the McCarter Theater in Princeton, and was incredibly enthused by it and excited about it. And then since then, we've been able to be in touch with them about the journey of the show. And I think, as Noah said, their support is a large part of the reason why we've been able to arrive at a place as extraordinary as the Roundabout.
It does lead to some strange situations in double casting. The actor who plays Jack also plays the character who kills Jack's mother.
Yeah.
A little edible there.
Although what's interesting about that, I think, in performance is that, first of all, Patrick Mulryan, like everyone in the ensemble, is a wonderful actor, and he plays both of those characters very, very distinctly. And what's interesting is when there are these switches that happen where he goes from being Jack to the steward. The audience never laughs at that in a way that you might think, like, oh, look at this company being so clever about this switch. No, they actually just switch with the company, with the actor, and they say, that was one character, this was another. And so they go along for that emotional ride. That resonance of double casting is there if it's of interest, and I think it does resonate through the audience, but it isn't something that is about cleverness.
Although we've seen double casting, anybody who goes to theater has been aware of it, and that's just something we accept as part of the theatrical experience.
I think so.
You
but
play two parts.
I do.
Your hair isn't long enough for in real life for the second part.
Well, we take
Rapunzel.
care of that in a certain way that that I hope resonates with people for Rapunzel. But I think we do accept it, but also I think, like Noah said, it sometimes feels like a miracle that people are following every step of the story or feel like they're following every step of the story, even when we're switching. And also when, I represent the young women, girls really of the piece. But they're different, but in a funny way, I don't even think of it as trying to define them as contrasting as much as I try to take responsibility for every moment of the story I'm in. And I think that's probably what Patrick and everyone else is doing. And then you're following a sequence of events and accepting it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think one of the...
Putting on Rapunzel's hair and saying, this is how we're doing this. And then I come right down off the ladder and I turn into Little Red with the cape. And we say, the acting starts now.
Well, you seem to almost be intent on keeping things as bare as possible.